With the release of the last chapter, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has come to an end in terms of content updates. One of the most polarizing Assassin's Creed games in the franchise, this was one of those games where you either spent 100 hours grinding everything involved, or you didn't touch the game more than once. The 2-year Viking journey from Ubisoft will always spark conversation within the community, so here are my final thoughts on the game. Starting with the last chapter itself, I can say that I'm glad that they decided to add an ending to this game 2 years after it released. One of my major issues with the game was the fact that after finishing the story that took me over 60 hours to complete, that the game did not have an ending to it. One of the most satisfying feelings for me as a player is seeing that title pop up with credits rolling after finishing a game. It's a rewarding feeling and one that we were left without. On top of an ending, the last chapter sets up the next entry in the series, Assassin's Creed Mirage, really well. There's a crossover mission where Eivor meets Roshan, a new character featured in Mirage, and then the final goodbyes. This is a narrative ending that I actually had to watch for myself on YouTube because the mission was nowhere to be found on my game, even after completing all the criteria to unlock. The Raven and the Cuckoo, which was the first part of the last chapter, became available for me, but that was it. So while it only took 2 years, I am thankful that I was able to get some sense of closure from this update. And now, since this game did come out 2 years ago, the early stages of this game may be forgotten about in the minds of some players, especially given the massive size of the game. Starting off in Norway, the beginning section of this game takes about 3 to 4 hours to complete and establishes the main plot of the game. And as we know throughout history, the Vikings left Norway to settle in the land known as England. The Norway map is really well done, and I enjoy the snowy, wintry feel of it. I'd also like to point out that it always felt like home to me within the game, and was cool to return to later on in the game with Sigurd on the longship. But when Eivor ultimately decides to sail to England to live his own life away from family, and the Assassin's Creed Valhalla title appears with the camera panning out, I remember feeling really excited for what the game had to offer. I was really invested into the story and wanted to find out what was going to happen next. The longship felt great, and there were a lot of unknowns, because what we knew at this point in the game was minimal, and the only main character that was introduced was Sigurd, Eivor's brother. Getting to England and settling down in what was eventually named Ravensthorpe instantly made England feel like home. This settlement and its customizability has to be one of my favorite things about the game, and how it made the raids worthwhile. This is arguably the biggest and most interactive settlement feature that Assassin's Creed has seen, and really allowed the player to turn it into whatever they wanted to. Buildings such as the dock to customize your longship, and the tattoo shop to change your hair and tattoos really got me excited about the game. Even building a stable behind the longhouse to change horses and ravens added another piece of customization. And while it may not align with the history of the game and setting, it's always fun in my opinion to have a personalized experience. My raven had wings of fire, and my horse looked like a constellation from the sky. It was at this point where I would say that I was most invested and interested in the game, as there were a lot of good things that it was doing for me. Of course, I mentioned that last part because getting into the real thick of the game is where things started to go south. And I'm not talking about sailing down the river in my longship raiding monasteries for supplies, because that part of the game was also amazing. The issue started to come into play for me when essentially the rest of the game consisted of consulting Randvi and the map of England on what territory to pledge the Raven clan to. The first couple were cool, sure, but when each arc chases Eivor around the massive map of England, repeats the same formula, and moves the story of the game along in no way, shape, or form, I can understand why players have issues with this game. With over 18 story arcs, I understand why this game is overwhelming for some, as there is also no motivation within the game to complete it. At this point, it just turns into a boring, open-world mess. The only interesting parts, in my opinion, were when Sigurd's storyline with Folke and Randvi came into play, which was about halfway through Eivor's journey through England. It's just frustrating to me that a massive AAA game that has as much detail as this one does, covering an awesome period in history, cannot put together a story good enough to keep players interested. For those on PlayStation like myself, this can be viewed under the game trophies, and the fact that only 15% of people who have launched this game have completed it. The gold trophy for this game is obtained by killing the leader of the Order of the Ancients, which is kind of the end of the game. Compare this to a great game in the series like Assassin's Creed 2, 33% of players have completed that. And if you want to look at a newer game that's more similar to Valhalla, Assassin's Creed Origins has a 36% completion percentage. Assassin's Creed Valhalla failed to keep players engaged, and I fear that it will be the way a lot of players remember it. It's too long, it can be too boring. Later on after release, there was a River Raids update that consisted of a Joms Viking barracks. I couldn't really get into the idea of River Raids and honestly only went on a couple, but I had my own Viking and enjoyed the idea of hiring other people's Vikings from within the community. I think that this is a feature that Ubisoft could improve on to make future games more interactive, like this with the community. When building the Seer's Hut in Ravensthorpe, the mythological story arcs of Asgard and Jotunheim become available to play. These are two realms from the world of Norse mythology and can be visited by Eivor through a vision that he sees from drinking a potion. I can agree with those that don't enjoy this game that it's at this point where we stray as far as we ever have from the golden age of Assassin's Creed games, but I actually really enjoyed these arcs as it was one of the few parts of the game that really felt fresh to me. Seeing characters such as Eivor, Sigurd, and Basim depicted as gods really put a twist on the story and added a layer of depth to each character's development. The maps were extremely well done, and the two viewpoints in Asgard are absolutely breathtaking. Later DLCs took players back into Norse mythology, but these two realms are a free part of the base game. I've already mentioned it a couple times now, but the Order of the Ancients was featured in this game for the third title in a row. These are a group of people out in the open world that are targets for Eivor to kill. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, this is the way to finish the game. The Order in this game does not have a huge purpose aside from that, and running around the map to kill different members feels almost pointless, especially considering that a large part of it is left out of the main story. Hytham settles in Ravensthorpe after building the Hidden One's hut, and is responsible for all codex pages found from the Order. And this is just included because codex pages are a part of the Assassin's Creed franchise, and really serve no purpose in the game unlike early entries in the series. I also wanted to talk about the protagonist Eivor and his role in the game. Overall, I would have to say that he's a pretty bland character that is nothing more than a Viking. It was frustrating at times how against joining the Creed that he was, considering how badly Hytham and Basim wanted him to. It was also hard for me to feel any emotional attachment towards him. Even though we see his father get killed by Kjotve in the beginning while playing as him in his youth, the whole wolf kiss thing didn't really do anything for me. Even though we saw him turn into a great leader for his clan, nothing about his journey made me want to learn more about him. Comparing him to my favorite assassins in the series, Ezio and Edward Kenway, they set a bar really high, and overall I would have liked to have seen Eivor transform into a more likable character. Overall, I definitely enjoyed my time playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, because there are a lot of individual cool elements to the game. It's a great looking game with multiple really well done maps. While the story itself may be too long and boring at times, I think that this is a title that deserves some respect that it doesn't get. And I also think that a lot of that comes from the words Assassin's Creed in the title, which gives players an expectation before even playing the game. If this is your first game of the series, then you'd probably think that this is a really good game, and would not be wrong to think so. At the same time, it would be hard for me to believe that we're going to see an Assassin's Creed game this big for quite some time, if ever again. Feel free to leave your thoughts below in the comments on whether or not you enjoyed your time playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and if you agree or disagree on any of the points that I made. It'd also be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next video.